Imagine these. April 26th, 1986. 1:23 in the morning. In northern Ukraine, right next to the city of Pripyat, an explosion tears through the night. But this is no ordinary explosion. Reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant has just blown apart. And at this very moment, an invisible cloud of death begins spreading toward Europe. But this story doesn't begin with the explosion. This story begins 10 days later, in a dark, flooded basement, with 3 men stepping into radioactive water up to their knees. You've all heard about the Chernobyl disaster. Maybe you've seen the TV series or read about it online. But the story I'm going to tell you today is one you've probably never heard. Because these 3 men quietly did their duty, received no medals, and for years, almost no one even knew their names. So what did these 3 divers do that saved all of Europe from catastrophe? And why was this story hidden for so long? If you're ready, I'm taking you back to the darkest nights of 1986. On the night of April 26th, a safety test was being conducted at Chernobyl, but a series of human errors and design flaws turned that test into the greatest nuclear disaster in human history. The reactor exploded. Radiation equivalent to 400 Hiroshima bombs was released into the atmosphere. But here is a fact most people don't know. The real catastrophe was indeed that night. It was threatening to happen 10 days later. How? When the reactor exploded, the nuclear fuel inside began to melt. Scientists call this substance corium labilac, deadly mass, at temperatures around 2000 degrees Celsius. This corium began eating through the reactor's concrete base, inch by inch, second by second, moving downward. And directly beneath the reactor was a massive water reservoir. 7,000 cubic meters of radioactive cooling water. Now, this is critical to understand. What would happen if that 2000-degree corium reached the water? Scientists call it a steam explosion, but this would not have been an ordinary one. It would have triggered explosions in the other 3 reactors, completely erased Pripyat from the map, and rendered much of Europe uninhabitable for 500 years. Kyiv, Minsk, Warsaw, all would have been evacuated. 50 million people would have been displaced. Half of Europe would have turned into a dead zone. And the worst part, this secondary explosion was estimated to be only 48 hours away. Soviet scientists worked desperately to find a solution. There was only one way to prevent the disaster: drain the water from beneath the reactor. But how? The valves controlling the reservoir were located directly under the reactor, in an area with the highest radiation levels. The corridors leading there were pitch dark, flooded with radioactive water, and lethal radiation filled the air. Robots sent into the area failed the radiation, destroyed their electronics. Remote-controlled systems stopped working. Even machines couldn't survive in that environment. Then a Soviet official said something terrifying. "We must send people." Everyone knew that anyone who went down there would not come back. At least, that's what they believed. At that moment, 3 men stepped forward. Aleksey Ananenko, the chief engineer at the plant. He was 33 years old and knew every corner of the facility. Valeriy Bezpalov, a highly skilled engineer, young and experienced. And Boris Baranov, a shift supervisor. He was the only one who knew the exact location of the valves. These 3 men volunteered of their own free will. No one forced them. Why would anyone volunteer for a mission that seemed like certain death? Perhaps the answer lies in what Valeriy Bezpalov reportedly said to his wife that day. "If we don't do it, who will? Our children's future is at stake. I have to go." May 6th, 1986. Early morning, the 3 men put on lead-lined diving suits. They carried flashlights and a simple wrench. Even before reaching the reactor, their Geiger counters began screaming. Imagine this. You're walking through a narrow, pitch-black corridor. Radioactive water reaches your knees. The air smells metallic, a smell of radiation. Every step brings you closer to an invisible death. The lead suits add extra weight, making it harder to move, harder to breathe. The flashlight beam trembles on the water's surface, and the shadows of pipes dance along the walls. And for a brief moment, you might stop and think, will I make it out of here alive? But Aleksey, Valeriy, and Boris didn't stop. They kept going. And here's a truth most people don't know. For years, The media claimed these 3 men went on a suicide mission and died within weeks. But the reality was very different. After about 20 minutes of navigating the dark corridors, they reached the valve. Ananenko and Bezpalov worked together to turn it, but it was jammed. Every second, deadly radiation penetrated their bodies. To put this into perspective, a chest X-ray is about 0.1 millisieverts of radiation. These men received an estimated dose of 4 to 5 sieverts in just 20 minutes. That's like getting 40,000 chest X-rays at once. Finally, the valve turned. Water began to drain. The mission was a success. The 3 men returned through the dark corridors. They were exhausted, their bodies saturated with radiation, but they were alive. And now comes the most fascinating part. For decades, it was widely reported that these 3 men died shortly after the mission. Even the famous HBO series Chernobyl portrayed them as heading towards certain death. But the truth is, they did not die. At least, not immediately. Boris Baranov passed away in 2005 from a heart attack, but not directly from the radiation. Aleksey Ananenko lived well into his later years. And Valeriy Bezpalov is believed to still be alive today. So how did they survive? 3 key reasons. The lead suits, while not perfect, blocked some radiation. The mission was short, only about 20 minutes, and the water itself, while radioactive, absorbed some of the most intense gamma radiation. Still, they took an enormous risk, and the long-term effects of that radiation undoubtedly followed them for years. So why did the media report them as dead? Because the Soviet Union concealed the true scale of Chernobyl for years. Many heroic stories were hidden, distorted, or forgotten. These 3 men were lost in that darkness. It wasn't until 2018, 32 years later, that the Ukrainian government officially honored them as heroes of Chernobyl. Their story forces us to confront a powerful question. What is courage? Most of us think courage means being fearless, but Aleksey, Valeriy, and Boris were not fearless. They understood exactly what radiation meant. They knew they could die. And yet, they went anyway. That is true courage. Doing what is right, despite being afraid. And here is another question. Is one person's life more valuable than the lives of millions? We live in a world that often celebrates individualism, but at critical moments in history, individuals sometimes must sacrifice for the greater good. That's what these men did. They chose millions of lives over their own. And perhaps the most striking part is this. They did it quietly, without expecting medals, fame, or recognition. They remind us that true heroism is often silent. True heroism is simply doing what must be done. What would you have done if you were asked to risk your life, your family, your future to save millions of strangers? What choice would you make? It's not an easy question, is it? The Chernobyl disaster officially claimed 31 lives in the immediate aftermath, but thousands of firefighters, engineers, and workers quietly did their duty. The story of Aleksey Ananenko, Valeriy Bezpalov, and Boris Baranov is unique, because they undertook perhaps the most dangerous mission of all and may have saved all of Europe. Remembering them today isn't just about retelling history. It's about remembering that even in humanity's darkest moments, hope exists. The world will always need heroes. Not allowed Hollywood style heroes, but silent, courageous people who simply do their duty, just like Aleksey, Valeriy, and Boris. So let me ask you, what part of this story surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, please subscribe, because history is full of heroes who must not be forgotten. Let's keep their memory alive.